first step to installing the Pulsar XT on your 2.0 liter Jeep Wrangler JL would be to disconnect the negative battery terminal from the battery. On the non-eTorque application like we have here, it's also worth mentioning that there is a secondary battery on this vehicle. So this second battery cable must be disconnected from the main. So we'll start by doing that using our 13mm socket. We can first loosen up that secondary battery cable. Simply remove the nut and pull that cable off of the main. And then we will use our 10mm socket to disconnect the main from the battery itself. The one thing to pay attention to is that during the installation you want to make sure that that secondary negative cable does not come in contact with the main battery cables, and that neither of them come in contact with the ground on the vehicle itself. So we could recommend placing a rag over it or both so that they do not come in contact with anything. Step 2 of the process will require us to remove this engine cover from the engine. There are two 10mm bolts located here on the top that must be removed, at which point the whole panel can be removed, and then we will need to remove this lower engine cover as well. The side engine panel will also be removed with a 10mm bolt located here on the back position. At which point it can be popped out of the lower mounts and set aside. For the next part of the install, we will be taking the Pulsar XT harness and placing it in series with the factory harnesses. We will be connecting here to the turbo boost sensor, which is located here in the turbo inlet tube, and also with the map sensor, which can be located down here along the side of the engine, down low here. It is a 4-wire connector that will need to be disconnected, at which point you will then connect the new Pulsar XT. One side goes to the engine, the other side goes to the engine harness. Same with the turbo boost sensor. We will plug one end of the Pulsar XT harness into the sensor, the other end will go into the engine harness. To disconnect the turbo boost sensor, we must first pull back the white keeper that is located on the top of the sensor, and then you can depress that white tab to allow the sensor to come disconnected. At which point we can then take our new harness and plug it in series, making sure to depress the keepers so that it stays connected. The map sensor is a little bit tougher to get access to, but it works the same as the turbo sensor with the white keeper, which must be pulled out and then depressed to get the map sensor connector to disconnect. You'll notice that it is a 4-wire connector. We have routed our new XT wiring harness over the inlet tube and around from below so that we have enough access and clearance with the connectors and the harness to put our engine cover back on. So we will plug the harness in, depress the tab, and then you'll also notice on the XT we have a red colored keeper that works much the same as the original. It will then plug into the map sensor, and then make sure to depress that red tab to lock it in place. For the next step of our installation process, we will be taking this smaller and longer wire out of our harness and be running it into the cab. This can be done by running it under the foam that is here under the hood. And then we need to snake this wire under this cowl. Now there are two ways you can do this. You can try fishing it through with a wire or a fish tape, or an easier way would be to remove this cover altogether with these Torx bits. There are 4 bolts, 2 here on the side and 2 on top. Because of our lighting and extra brackets, we're gonna just fish it through, but removing it will give you great access to route this wire into the cab. Once you've successfully routed your wire under that engine cowl cover, we will need to route it through and underneath this foam connector of the door jamb, and then we'll be rerunning it through the inside of the dash with access through this panel so that we can connect to the CAN bus line that is located here behind the jockey box. All right, using a small plastic trim tool or a plastic headed flathead screwdriver, you can slip it in between this panel and pop it out. And removing this cover will give you better access for routing this cable into our CAN bus location. So again, we're going to route this under our foam so that it is protected and won't be damaged with the door opening and closing. And then the end of our wire can be run through this small slot here in the dash and routed downwards to the floorboard. At this point, we need to remove our jockey box by simply opening it, and at the top you'll find a small keeper that keeps the jockey box from opening too far, and you basically just depress that upwards, and that will allow the jockey box to drop entirely out of the way. You'll find our wire that was routed into under the dash, and you'll then see this green panel that has a bunch of electrical connectors on it. This connection from our Pulsar XT can be placed into any of the open spots on that green main. We'll simply connect it, making sure you hear it click and it's connected so that it's tight. And our connection is now done inside the cab, with our final step being adding the Pulsar XT module to the harness and then connecting our power wire and reconnecting our ground wires. The one thing to pay attention to is that when you are reinstalling the jockey box, you will notice that there is this keeper on the driver's side of the box that must be lined up with a small round keeper inside the dash, and that is just an alignment tab, and it allows the easy open close function of the jockey box. All right, to finish up our installation, everything can be done here under the hood. We're going to be mounting our new Pulsar XT module. This is done by simply connecting it to the harness, making sure that it clicks. And then there are some double side Velcro that can be attached to the back of the module, and it can be permanently affixed here to the top of your fuse panel. The last step would be to connect the ground wire, or I'm sorry, the power wire, the yellow power wire, to our battery terminal here. So again, using our 10mm ratchet, we're going to loosen this small nut and remove it. Again, we want to make sure that our wiring is routed where it's in a safe place, away from heat or moving sources. We will route the power wire here to connect it, and then reinstall our 10mm nut. And snug it down with our ratchet. At this point, we can make sure that our positive battery connector cover is repositioned. Make sure our wiring, there are zip ties included so that you can make sure these wires stay safe. And then we can finally reconnect our negative battery terminal. Again, on the non-e-torque, you'll have this extra cable that you'll need to reconnect. So we're going to start by attaching our main to the battery. And Then our secondary battery cable can be reconnected as well. And we'll use our 13mm socket to make sure that that's snugged up into place as well. At this point, our installation is complete. We can reinstall our side and top engine covers, and then again we can use some zip ties, make sure that our wiring harness is routed and safe, and then we can move into the cab and start up the settings for the Pulsar XT.
Alright, here we are in the cab of our 2-liter Jeep Wrangler. We're going to walk you through the steps of how to control your Pulsar XT power levels with your cruise control buttons here on the steering wheel. And then we will also walk through the setup of the Pulsar XT to modify our TPMS settings, our tire size, our gear ratio, and then we can also use this module to clear and read our diagnostic trouble code should you ever have to check engine light. So our first step is going to turn the Jeep on without starting the engine. We're going to do this by depressing the start button twice. This will put us in a powered on situation without the engine running. Once our screen is up, you can scroll through your display to find your audio setting. This is where it shows our music is on or off. Now at this point, we can press our set plus or set minus buttons on our cruise control side to see which power levels our device is in. Our dash will now display level 1, so that is power level 1 above stock. If you turn the Pulsar XT down using the set minus button, you can see that we are now in our stock program. And by simply pressing that set plus, we can go up through our power levels all the way up to level 5, which will add up to 20 horsepower and 30 foot-pounds of torque. The one thing to note is that these power levels can be changed at any time while driving, as long as your cruise control is turned off. When you have your cruise control set on the freeway, pressing that set plus and set minus will work as factory to increase your cruise speed or decrease your cruise control speed. So in order to change your power levels, you have to make sure that you have your cruise turned off by pressing the cancel button, and then you can change those power levels at any time while you're driving. The other thing to mention at this point is the ability to enable or disable your engine auto start-stop function. Now with this Jeep, you have a factory button on the dash, and that button will still work as factory with the Pulsar XT, except with our module installed, the vehicle will now remember that button setting. So if you are someone that does not like to have your engine start-stop engaged so that the engine is shutting off every time you stop at a stop sign or a stoplight or in traffic, and you are common pressing that button every time you get in the vehicle, the Pulsar XT will remember that button setting. So every time you shut the vehicle off and come back to start the engine again for another drive cycle, it will remember that you had that setting off, and it will just keep it off all of the time so that you no longer have to press that button on every startup. The nice thing with this feature is that by simply pressing that button to re-engage your auto start-stop, it will function as factory. So it's just going to remember where the button was left off when you shut the engine the next time you start the vehicle. At this point, we can enter our setup modes and kind of walk you through how to set up the different settings that the Pulsar XT has control over. Now to enter our setup mode, we're going to press and hold our cruise cancel button for 5 to 7 seconds. You'll see the dash will change. Now it's asking for TPMS off. Now this system will allow you to disable your TPMS sensors altogether. So if you've installed an aftermarket wheel and tire package that does not have your factory TPMS sensors in it, you can use your set plus or set minus to disable that feature altogether. So TPMS off, yes or no. This one actually still has the TPMS sensors in our aftermarket wheels and tires. So we're going to select no. We're going to press resume, which will take us to our adjust TPMS setting. And again, we've got our yes or no selections by pressing set plus or set minus. Now we want to adjust this sensor by selecting yes. We'll select resume again. And now this is going to let us set what our pressure is set up. So when that light comes on the dash, what PSI would you like to have that light come on? We will use our set plus and set minus buttons to change this. So we can go all the way down to 22 PSI. So for you guys that do a lot of off-roading, you can set this threshold down at 22 PSI. So when you're letting the air out of your tires, you don't have that light come on when you're crawling. or if you're someone that's on the road but has an aftermarket set of tires and you need to change that factory setting down from where the original is set, you have total control of where you want that threshold to pop that check engine light so that you have a low tire. So since we're going to be doing some off-roading with this Jeep soon, we're going to go ahead and set this at a lower threshold. So normally it's around 35 to 36 PSI. We're going to change that to 25 PSI. So using our set plus and set minus button, we can select our numeral 2, and then we'll press resume to bounce over to our next digit, and we can press our set plus or set minus to change that. We're going to set it at 25, press resume again. Now it's asking us if we want to program this setting, yes or no. We're going to press set plus to change to yes, and then select resume to go ahead and program that into the vehicle. Now we're going to move on to our tire size. With the tire size being changed in this Jeep to a 37 inch, we're going to go ahead and select yes so that we can program our larger tire size into the Jeep. So we'll select yes with our set plus button, and then we'll press resume. Now it's going to ask us if we want to enter our tire size in a metric measurement or in an English measurement. For ease, we're going to go to the English, press resume. Now it's going to ask us for our tire size. The one thing to remember when you're setting your tire size, it is always going to be most accurate on the speedometer if you actually measure your height of the tire with a tape measure. Very rarely will you find a 37-inch tire actually stands 37 inches once it's mounted on the vehicle. Same with a 35-inch. It's pretty common to find a 35-inch tire, 35, 1250. R17 is actually only going to be about 33.5 inches tall once it's mounted on the Jeep. Now, this Jeep is running an aftermarket set of 37-inch tires, but they only measured 35.8 with our tape measure. So again, using our set plus or minus, we can go through and change those numerical values on the dash to read 35.8. So we'll select 3, press resume. It's going to bounce to the next one. We can go through our 35, 36, 37. We're going to set this at 35 and press resume to bounce to the final increment. We're going to set that at 35.8, press resume. Now it's going to ask us for our axle ratio. Now this is for those of you that have changed your ring and pinion. This is a factory Rubicon model that came equipped with the 410s, so we have not changed the gear ratio in this. But should you do that when you put your lift and larger tires, we can select the set plus button to find yes, and then we can go in and set up that ring and pinion change as well. This one's still factory, so we're going to select no, press resume. Now it's going to ask us if we want to program all of these changes. We want to set plus for yes, press resume. The vehicle will now start programming our changes into the vehicle's computer system. Once it's done, it will ask us to turn the Jeep off and allow it to do a full power down cycle. And then the next time we start the vehicle, all of those systems will be saved. And you've now completed the setup. The other options is the ability to read and clear your diagnostic trouble codes. For information on that, refer to your owner's manual. And then if you have any further questions regarding the installation or the proper function of your Pulsar XT, please reach out to our tech support team over the phone, and keep us posted on social media on your thoughts of the 2.0 liter Pulsar XT module, available now.